You're in the gray zone. I'm Mark Ebner. I'm an investigative journalist, multi-award-winning investigative journalist. I'm an author. I think I'm working on my 8th or 9th book right now. And I'm a private investigator, and I'm sitting here high atop the HMS Bounty in K-Town. And I'm here with comedy guy, brother in ink, Carl Kozlowski.
Hey.
Yep, Carl's going to be throwing some three-pointers our way, and we got Dr. David Robinson twisting the knobs.
Getting twisted.
Yeah, you're going to be twisting a fat spliff at the end of this one, pal. Oh, my gosh. Private investigator. Yeah, I've been lost. I was actually joking around last week when I mentioned that my former partner, Dano Hanks, is doing a single digit in federal corrections right now on a Hobbs Act extortion beef, and that kind of put a damper on things. But, you know, I don't want to laugh about that because Dano was a friend. He is a friend. He's a generous guy. He comes from a different era. My God, he's got stories galore, and I'm going to share some of them with you here. But why is he in jail? What happened? Well, first of all, I'd like to say I'm glad I wasn't involved in this one with him, but there was a scandal. You might have remembered. It was a guy named Owen Hansen, former USC football player, turned drug trafficker, and ran an illegal gambling operation out of Peru. He was taking in millions of illicit dollars. And yet the guy had a hard edge to him. He, like any bookie, I suppose, if you flaked on him, and you didn't pay, he would exact revenge. And that's how he got his hooks into Dano. And what happened next was, Owen Hansen had came up with a really stupid way to launder money. And what he did was he hooked up with a professional gambler, a guy named Cipriani. Cipriani had made his mark in the gambling world as sort of the Robin Hood of gamblers. In other words, he'd go out and he'd, win card tournaments and win big bets. And allegedly, he'd turn his winnings over to 501c3s. He'd donate his winnings to charity. Do I believe that? Not for a second. But that's how he tried to position himself in the gambling world, the Robin Hood of gambling. Yeah, right. Well, anyway, Cipriani, what happened was Owen Hansen, this former USC football player turned, cartel guy / sports gambling impresario. What he did was Owen gave Cipriani $2.5 million and said, go gamble it. And, essentially what he's doing is he's laundering his drug money through the casino where this guy was gambling. What did Cipriani do? He took the $2.5 million and lost it all.
Wow.
He lost it all. And I guess this was going on in Australia, and Cipriani didn't even want to be on the same continent as Owen Hansen, so he came back to the United States and decided to lay low for a while. Owen Hansen, he in turn found my former P.I. partner, Dano Hanks, and hired him to start working on helping him get his money back from Cipriani. Strange story ensues. Dano made the number one mistake that a PI should never make, and that is he didn't vet his clients. He looked up Owen Hansen. What, a cursory Google search? Yeah, you might get, this guy owns a lot of real estate, so he figures the guy's in real estate. But, and Dano will admit this, he didn't vet him out enough. Otherwise, he would have known what he was getting into headlong. And what happened was Owen Hansen sent him on a road trip, paid him like $7,000 or $5,000 or something like that, and sent him clear across the country to Pennsylvania. Dano weighs about 350 pounds. Needless to say, he doesn't fly, okay? And he gets to Pennsylvania, calls up Owen Hansen and says, "What's next, boss?" And Owen Hansen says, "I want you to go to a cemetery." Okay? Dano goes to the cemetery. He says, "I want you to look for this gravestone." He goes to a family plot. Whose family plot is it? Any guesses? Cipriani. You almost had it there, partner.
I realized the mic wasn't on as I started answering.
Okay.
No points this round.
I remembered part of the name. Not
That's
the other.
okay. Yeah. Something hinky's going on here right now because now he's at the family grave plot for the Cipriani family. Okay, boss, what do you want me to do now? Owen Hansen says, I want you to take a photograph of that grave. He takes the photograph, sends it to him. Owen Hansen says, "Listen, I want you to go out and get some fake blood. I want you to come back to the grave. I want you to pour it on the grave." Okay. This right there should have been like you're going to, this is desecrating a grave. There's an offense in there somewhere, right? So Dano goes to a hardware store or whatever, and he thinks he's getting water-soluble red paint, and no, it's not because it was supposed to rain the next day. No, he got the stuff that's indelible. He threw it on the grave, took a picture of that, comes back to L.A., okay? Comes back to L.A., job's not over. Owen Hansen says, "Listen, you good at Photoshop? Cool. I want you to take a picture of me." And he put on one of those, what's that Mexican wrestling, those masks they wear?
Lucha
Yeah,
Luchadora.
Luchadora, yeah.
Luchadora. These Mexican wrestlers wear those crazy, frightening scare masks and stuff like that. Owen Hansen himself, right down near here by the La Brea Tar Pits, posed for a photo of him wearing that hat and, holding a Grim Reaper
a scythe,
and basically saying, imposing onto that gravestone that he photographed with blood all over it, saying something like, "You're next," Wow. And he, in turn, shipped that off to Cipriani as a threat. Well, anyway, the cops were closing in on Owen Hansen, and they ended up catching him. He pled guilty. All his associates pled guilty, and they showed up at Dano's apartment. He was living over in North Hollywood at the time. The feds came in, guns drawn, kicked his door in, and arrested him at 72 years old, 350 pounds. Private investigator Dano Hanks is going down on a Hobbs Act extortion beef, and he ended up pleading guilty. He's now in federal prison on that, and I think he's lost 40 pounds. He's always bugging me about putting money on his books. I got to get to that. He's he's walking the yard down there at Las Tuna Federal Correction Facility and just across the border by El Paso, Texas. And, he's doing all right. Man, the guy's got quite a story. Tell you a little bit about Dano. He's 72 now, but let's go back to where it all began. He was grew up in Southern California down near San Diego. His mother got him into acting as a child. He got out of that real quick, and this is how he explains it. He was cast as a child, like background talent, in a movie that was shooting on Catalina Island, starring Dom DeLuise. Huh. Well, one night, Dom DeLuise said, look, I'll take you back to the mainland. And, so little Dano is like, whoo, I get to go back with the star. Well, he takes him to, some hotel, gives him something to drink. This is like a running theme on this show, But anyway, needless to say, Dano passes out on the bed. He wakes up, and he's four posts tied to the bed with Dom DeLuise sucking his dick.
No.
Wow.
Well, that's what he says.
Captain Chaos.
And we're allowed to air this?
Of course, Dom DeLuise is dead, and as we know here in the gray zone, dead men don't sue. However, apologies go out to his son, who I know,
Oh, my.
That's Dano's story. He's sticking to it. And anyway, that's the beginning of his life. Needless to say, after something like that, getting molested as a child actor, and so began his life of crime. He joins the Navy. He's got two skills. He goes to Vietnam. He's a sharpshooter, and he's also an electronics expert. Very valuable in the U.S. Navy. He caught a bullet there. So in reality, we're talking about a hero here. He got mustered out, full VA benefits, came back to Southern California, and he started in his life of crime. He became a second-story guy, a burglar. Needless to say, he wasn't 350 pounds back then because he'd never fit in a window. He did this for a while, and the way he tells it is, he didn't do it so much for the money. He did it for the thrill ride. And you'll find that with burglars and heist guys and stuff like that, it's 50-50 at the very least. They're in it for the thrill. And believe me, I can understand that. So anyway, he eventually goes to prison. And Dano's a smart guy. And while he's in prison, he files a writ of habeas corpus and succeeds in getting his original conviction overturned. He leaves prison. I forget where he was, but he winds up in San Francisco looking through the classified ads, and he sees that a legendary private investigator named Jack Immendorf had a classified ad out looking for private investigators. So he figures, what the hell? He walks in, and he gets on with Mr. Immendorf, and I guess the way he gets hired was pretty much on a takes one to know one basis. I think Immendorf liked him because of his criminal past and figured that he brought the skills necessary. So he basically mentored him into the PI trade, working under his license, by the way. As a convicted felon, he wasn't able to get a license of his own until, and we'll get to that. I'm sorry, Carl.
No.
Okay. So he's in San Francisco and, working insurance cases, nothing too spectacular. And then he hooks up with a guy named Fred Mad Dog Vallis. Now, Fred, R.I.P., he died several years back. Great guy, good friend, blah, 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 blah. Fred was, it's hard to explain, looks a little bit like Ricky Jay.
Huh.
But, kind of a darker, meaner version of Ricky Jay. Always wore a black leather duster, had his hair slicked back, and it was down over his shoulders. Ultra right-winger. And he was a warlock. He practiced witchcraft. I don't know what that's about, by the way, but I've met two right-wingers on either side of the law. One of them was a hitman on a story I was working in Providence, a guy who had actually completed a life sentence. Have either of you ever met anyone who actually finished a life sentence?
No.
Well, this guy, Mr. Jerry Tillingast of Providence, Rhode Island, who in the 70s was an enforcer for Raymond L.S. Patriarca, the head of the New England Mafia, got out of prison. And I was interviewing him in Providence, my hometown, a couple of years ago. And, I said to him, what is it with the witchcraft and Republicans? And, he didn't fully answer my question, because what he ended up telling me was that basically when you're in prison, and believe me, he did a life sentence, so he had some experience in that department, both federal and state. He did a murder sentence. He said, listen, man, when you're a warlock, you get to do all kinds of crazy rituals out in the yard underneath the moon. You know what I mean? So it makes sense. You're in prison. You want to find that particular recognized religion whereby you can practice witchcraft.